And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, appreciate you for making LOR your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Saymon, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA Draft, mock draft, player rankings, and of course, big boards. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast, wherever you listen to and get this podcast: Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube, everywhere. Now, let's talk a little Walker Kessler out of Auburn here for a moment. Walker Kessler, a lot of similarities between Mark Williams and Walker Kessler, two guys very gifted when you just look at their physicals, their size. Although Walker Kessler, not quite the athlete that Mark Williams would be, just lacking a lot of the explosiveness that makes Mark Williams so unique, both as a defender and as an offensive force. Now going over Walker Kessler's physicals here, weighs about 245 pounds. He's a little over 7 feet tall, 7'5" wingspan. What's absurd about him is he has a great feel for the game defensively, blocked 4.5 shots per game, just swatting anything and everything that came near the rim for Auburn. A complete defensive force. Somebody, and that's a skill set that is absolutely going to translate to the NBA level. Somebody that really has that great feel for how to defend the interior. So much of that, right, boils down to like defensive IQ. And you've got the physicals that he has, plus the defensive IQ, the understanding of where to be, when to rotate, when to jump, when to contest, all those different things. It leads to a guy who gets 4.5 blocks per game. Now, yeah, that's 4.5 blocks per game at the collegiate level. Is he going to average almost 5 blocks a game as an NBA player right out the gate? Probably not. But this skill set is absolutely there, and he's going to be an impressive defensive force that is going to be ready to help an NBA team pretty much right away, because he's got the size to be an immediate impact player. So when you look at just his overall skill set, right, he's got the shot blocking, he's got the defensive awareness, the defensive IQ. He is a relatively decent skilled interior scorer. Great hustle around the game, just a great feel for the game for a big. And we'll pull up his shot profile here, because this is kind of what has me a little bit more down on him than I probably was a bit earlier in the season. Because when you see a guy with his size, with his physicals, who can theoretically stretch the floor all the way out to the 3-point line, you get really excited because you're like, oh, a unicorn, right? A poor man's Chet Holmgren, if you will, somebody who's going to be that defensive force, who has some somewhat like guard-like skills offensively, which is another area where I'd say Walker Kessler and Mark Williams kind of differ. Is Walker Kessler can kind of put the ball on the floor a little bit, can play make a little bit, nothing fancy, nothing extravagant, but definitely a little bit more comfortable with the ball in his hands, I would say, than a Mark Williams. But when you look at his shot chart, was very capable on the interior, was solid and strong in and around the basket. But then you go and you look at his numbers away from the basket, and you start getting really concerned. So he shot 81% at the rim. Then he goes all the way down to 46.2% in the painted area. And then if you go all the way out to the perimeter, just going around the horn, he shot 22% from the 22.2% from the left wing, 10.5% from the top of the key, and then just 18.2% from the right wing. So is he a 3-point shooter? Not really. I mean, he shot 20% for the year, just 10 of 50 from the 3-point line. Now, apparently he did shoot better when he was in high school. So maybe, it's a down year, a fluke season, what have you. Like, I don't want to be, incredibly too harsh on him, but for a guy that should have kind of that unicorn capability as a player, it really didn't show out during his collegiate run. And again, he, very similar to Mark Williams, he's going to be kind of a drop defender, but I think he's a bit more mobile on the perimeter as a guy who can defend a little bit better, kind of keep up with some guards, at least at a slightly better level. Just, good ability to move his feet a little bit, kind of stopping on a dime. And again, a part of that is just that anticipation factor, right? As a shot blocker, that defensive awareness, the ability to kind of, anticipate what an offensive player is going to do. And anticipation is a big part of being a decent shot blocker. One area that I had in my notes here that I actually forgot to mention for Mark Williams that does apply to both these guys, Mark Williams and Walker Kessler. Both guys have great hands for big men. I feel like it's kind of, and maybe that's part of the way the NBA game is translating. Maybe it's just an old stereotype that like bigs were kind of, these, clumsy giants, if you will. But Walker Kessler and Mark Williams, both solid hands, catching passes in and around the rim, being able to finish them, kind of soft touch in and around the bucket. The ability to set solid screens, all these different areas of their game that make them really solid big men. But when it comes to Walker Kessler, again, I think that there's the legitimate concern about whether or not his outside game is actually going to translate. And then when you look at, if you kind of effectively remove that from his game, seeing as how it didn't exactly blow anybody out of the water, then you're left with just kind of a poor man's version of Mark Williams. And I think at that point, that's what makes Mark Williams such, a more enticing prospect, because he does some of the other things that Walker Kessler does already significantly better, like the interior finishing, like the defensive presence, just a better rim running big, if that's how you're going to boil him down. Now, maybe there's the ability for Walker Kessler to kind of bounce back at the NBA level, get that three ball up to a place where he's at least a competent catch and shoot player. Doesn't have a ton left in his offensive arsenal, doesn't have really go to post moves or anything like that. So again, I was really excited by Walker Kessler. The blocking numbers were out of this world this past season. And I thought that he would be like the perfect guy to throw into this Rockets system and maybe throw alongside like an Alperen Sengun, or, if they draft Paolo Banchero, that kind of guy. But I feel like his draft stock is kind of plummeting a little bit. I've seen some mocks where he's going like all the way at the end of the first round now, or, early 20s kind of area. So I'm confident he's going to be on the board when the Rockets are selecting at 17, but I'm also not incredibly confident that he's going to be the best player for the Rockets to select on the board at pick 17. But I wanted to lump him together with Mark Williams, kind of knock out the two centers back to back as we're clearing out our draft profiles just ahead of the NBA draft. So do me a favor. Let me know what you think about Mark Williams and Walker Kessler as prospects in the YouTube comments. Let me know about how you feel about the Christian Wood extension. Let me know in the YouTube comments. I do read each and every one of those. But as always, appreciate you checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all platforms. Already mentioned it a couple times, but check us out on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.